gon' be soaked. So listen up, cause this hair of the dog, what's real, what ain't? Is this the fog or smog? Cause there's a difference when you breathe it in. So don't let the corporate media take you for a spin. This that morning show, they put you in the know. So I hope that you ready, cause all we do is go, go, go. Yeah, come get your info, you gon' be like, whoa. Hair of the dog, we bout that, ayy. We in the zone, we out here, yeah. Spitting the facts.
Good morning. Welcome to Hair of the Dog. I'm Andy Kennedy, and it is Monday, your house. We are going to start the week off with an unbelievable show. We have a special guest who actually people might recognize. Wow, right? Kerri Barber, what do you think of that?
Hey, good morning, Andy. How are you? It's Monday. Woo. It was a rough weekend for my household, but happy to be back. Well, we don't get weekends here. We just
Did you get a blizzard?
So, no, that was our next door neighbors in Texas. So Texas, Central Texas, and across most of the Panhandle, Texas got 9 inches of snow. So as of today, there are, I think the estimate was 150,000 houses without power. So that's 150,000 families during a pandemic without electricity, heat for water, things like that. So not a happy Monday for a lot of folks, but the storm is now moving across to, I think they said, Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia, and will turn into rain. So,
Yes.
Yeah, those people are not having a good time either.
Well, like you used to know, and I currently still know, right? When you get weather like that, Canadians will say, time to barbecue.
That's right. Like when I woke up this morning, the temperature was 18 degrees. And in Chicago, that'd be like, oh, you might need a jacket. You might need a jacket. So it's what it is.
Yeah. It's what you're used to, I guess. Oh, well.
Yeah. So this morning I was fully planning to have to do a correction or retraction to something I said on Friday. That's not the case. So on Friday, I had talked about the charges that would be coming down for the terrorists who tried to overthrow our government. So I'm using that term accurately for anyone who might be a little butthurt about it, but we now know that they had intended to go into the Capitol and to restrain, take hostages possibly. We saw the gentleman out of, I believe it was Arkansas, who had paramilitary training, had the sidearm on his hip, numerous others brought firearms and zip ties. They had intended to take hostages and do whatever else. So terrorist is the appropriate phrase here. So on Friday, I had relayed conversations that I was having with federal district attorneys and others about what kind of charges we could expect from these people. And on Friday, I said they all agreed that you are not going to see anything more than breaking and entering and basic charges. Not that they are not serious charges, but basic charges. And then on Saturday, some of the headlines came out about the folks in Florida who participated, who have been tracked down. Way to go, Twitter. You are way faster than the FBI in identifying these people. But some of those folks, the headline read that they have been charged with sedition. And I was like, okay, I'm happy to see that. But that meant that I had to come on here and clarify something that I said Friday. But as of this morning, new headlines and new details about it. And let me go ahead and put this article up so I don't get it wrong. But there are 3 people in Florida who have so far been arrested and charged. And what they have been charged with was not necessarily sedition. It says they were charged with knowingly entering or remaining in any restricted building or grounds without lawful authority, that's trespassing, and violent entry and disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds. That's a felony level charge. So nowhere in here is sedition. So it's inconclusive right now. So headlines initially said sedition over the weekend. Now when we're actually seeing the charges come out, no. So looking forward to that. And the other thing that I am personally looking forward to is these are ordinary citizens that are being charged. I have yet to see anyone in Congress or anyone in the lettered agencies be arrested and charged. So hopefully that happens. But just wanted to make that clarification, and I did post links on this. The other
Now,
thing I found
Kerri,
this
one
morning
thing,
is
just sorry for interrupting, but one thing I wanted to mention
no, please.
is that apparently some of the people that have been identified as people that were involved in the inside the Capitol have tried to fly somewhere and have been told they are on the no-fly list, right?
Yeah.
I guess that would be either TSA or Homeland Security, which are official government departments, which means that I guess that anybody that is being charged is also now considered a terrorist.
Yes, exactly. So it is a legal definition proven by, the no-fly list. Well, hell, I mean, don't be upset. We put nuns on it. George Bush put 3 nuns on it who wanted to come and protest his austerity policies. So it stands to reason if you storm the Capitol with weapons and handmade IUDs, you're going to be on a terrorism watch list. Quit crying. So one thing that I did post in the links, and it's there, is a memo that came out from the Department of Justice in September. Barr wanted to charge Black Lives Matter people with sedition back in September. And these were the folks who, the Wall of Moms, the Wall of Veterans, just ordinary folks who are out there protesting that we actually want a country that follows our own constitution with equal protection and due process. So that was going to get us sedition charges. But I can't find any charges. If you find charges of somebody who is actually charged with sedition, please let me know. Throw it in the chat and everything else. So with that, I want to say good morning to Mike and to Dave and everyone else who's posting up in our chat. We are live and interactive. So what that means is that if you write something in the chat in YouTube, on Facebook, or any of our other pages, we will see it here and we will respond. And that's a good thing for the conversation that we're having. This absolutely includes you, your opinions, and what you think, but as well as the guests that we have on today. So this is going to be a great show because it extends to the conversation that we're having now that applies to everything that happened last week, but also canceling the squad. There was this huge outpouring of, well, we're dividing the left over the force the vote issue. And even now, with Congress having had an attempted coup, and oh, by the way, rumors of more coming, they're largely dragging their feet. And it's, people are just incredulous to why they're doing this and stopped the conversation about stimulus and Medicare for all, because apparently we can only do one thing at a time. So the guests that we have coming up today, I'm excited because we're going to have a conversation about what may be going on behind the scenes and how things actually work. Not just from what happens when a candidate becomes an elected official, but when you work on a campaign, stuff that goes on behind the scenes is pretty significant and very telling. So this is going to be a really good conversation to consider as we go forward about what's happening in your own state house, your own legislatures, as well as Congress. So without further ado, I want to welcome our guest, Mr. Adamson. Good morning. How are you?
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, Trevor.
Good.
I just want to correct something. The zip tie guy, is that the guy you were referring to?
Yeah. One of the zip tie guys, but yes, the one that was pictured jumping over the rail in the gallery above the, I believe it was the house.
So it just so happens that I had a post up that I had posted about him. His name is Eric Munchell, if I'm pronouncing Munchell, I think. He's from Nashville, Tennessee. I actually know him.
Oh, wow. Nashville. Oh, so do you know him?
I know him.
Or know of him?
Yeah, and it actually might go into the topic, Will, about campaigning and organizing, because back in March of 2020, that there was a tornado that hit Nashville. And I, as a, progressive organizer, worked with other people across the city. It just so happened that, I'll get into this later, but, I worked in the bar life before the Bernie Sanders campaign. So there was a lot of bartenders and bouncers that came out to help. And Eric Munsell was one of them. And I don't know.
Okay.
Worked with him on several days. It's really sad to see him in this position. And I'm not going to speak to the legalities of what happened because I don't know exactly what happened, but to see the radicalization, I feel that is on both sides. Not that absolves anybody from anything they do illegal, but I do, having worked with him, cleaning up tornado relief and helping tornado victims, and then seeing that is kind of crazy.
Well, I think that's kind of the same reaction that we're all having. And you see this across social media or talking to friends and family. The polarization has gone even deeper. In fact, people are saying, I'm seeing more Trump support signs in my neighborhood. Neighbors who never had one before now have one. They're everywhere. They're everywhere. And I'm like, well, yeah. So we did not necessarily know that some of our neighbors were totally okay with overlooking all of these egregious policies and things that had happened and are completely in favor with sedition, right? So this is what a crazy time we live in. But wow, so you know the guy. And I'm sure that we can make that case for like my own parents who have now since passed away. But when candidate Trump getting elected, they were both fervent supporters. And then they also went into overt racism and were totally okay with that. These were aspects of my own family that I was not familiar with until, here came somebody on the scene that made these things acceptable. Now, we in the progressive space, we have similar complaints when it comes to economic inequality and all of the pieces that contribute to the angst and desperation that some of the Trump people feel. But we're not going to go into the social space where we condemn and demonize our neighbor because of what they look like or gender or any of those things that seem to be acceptable on the other side. So it's an interesting commentary on where we are in the U.S. right now. But so politics, what we have always said and what we've been taught is that, well, if you don't like the system, change it, get involved, step up, put your name in. And you did that, right? So why don't you go through a little bit of your experience? Why should anybody care what you have to say about campaigning and organizing?
Yeah, well, I was hired onto the Bernie campaign in 2016. I think I bring a little bit unique perspective just from the fact that I was one of those people that got into politics because of Bernie Sanders, albeit a little bit earlier. Started way early in 2015 campaigning. I think I have the unique perspective of not having any idea what campaign life was really like. So I'm kind of when you ask me certain things, you got to take Trevor, about 5 years ago versus now. And I think one of the biggest, markers for someone that was just kind of getting in to help their community and do what, their civic duty type philosophy, was kind of the, I didn't know anything about the DNC per se, or, I voted for Obama twice. It was not as personal. I didn't know enough to not like, HRC or the DNC. They, their actions in the 2016 campaign kind of pulled me away from that. And I saw that dynamic working, from the grassroots side and the campaign, like what we call the campaign industrial complex, people that are career campaigners. And I saw them, constantly clashing through all that. And it was just kind of a wake up of how it really worked.
It's interesting. So you were radicalized by Hillary Rodham
Per se, you know, I think the first part of my radicalization, if you want to call it that, is when we had a protest for more debates. You know, I went into it all like, we're on the same team, let's go, guys. And that's probably why I was hired to the campaign. You know, I was doing a lot of work, and I had that, you know, positive attitude, albeit naive. But one of the biggest things that I noticed was when we protested we called it a rally. So this is kind of the brief story. They did a hashtag allow debates. I don't know I know everybody remembers the situation, but there was a group of people that were having them across the nation. So at various DNC dinners and things like that. So they had contacted us. We said, of course, you know, we want more debates too. We'll jump in. And just to point out my naivety at the time, I went to the people we were organizing with, and I said, I had been contacted by members of you know, the TNTP and other various people that were affluent in the you know, in the community, and they said, hey, you know, they want you to shut that down because it's going to, you know, reflect poorly on the party. And I was like, well, you know, the constituents, the people want more debates. So, you know, we feel like, you know, it's our duty to get more debates. It was very linear like that for me at the time. So I went back to the group. I'm like, hey, they're saying to shut this down because it'll look poorly and it'll create division. You know, the things they try to gaslight for any level of dissent. And so probably more so, I guess the group I was organizing with were kind of naive too, because they were like, well, let's call it a rally. I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. We'll do it. We'll make it a rally instead of a protest, you know? So when I took that back, they were like, oh no, we don't want you to do the protest at all. And I was like, that was one of the first moments where I was like, oh, okay, well we're not going to do the protest. So we'll call it a rally for you. But there were people on the campaign that started warning me, like saying like, hey, you know, you don't need to push back on the party. You don't need to, you know, if you want a career in this. And that was kind of the aspect. I didn't get into it trying to get into career. Right. So yeah, they sent out security to address us, you know, and tell us to keep it calm and all those things. And it, you know, it was the first time where I was like, I don't know if we're all on the same team here. It doesn't seem like it.
Mm-mm.
Did anybody ever tell you that you weren't a team player?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
It gets worse than that too. Once you really buckle down.
I don't know about you, but the minute it happened to me, I went right out and burned my pink pussy hat. That was it.
Oh no.
That's exactly it. And you said something that Andy and I have talked about. We've had other guests talk about it. That moment where they put that arm around you and say, there's a place for you here. For you, it was, hey, if you want a career here, right? So they made it personal and couched it in friendly terms, but it's really a veiled threat.
Yeah, no, it's a total veiled threat. And by the way, yeah, I mean, I can't count how many times that was told to me. And I want to acknowledge too, because I'm sure people will watch this. I'm not going to blow up anybody's spot. I will just have to be honest and say that I don't know how much, you know, I'm on board with working through the system. Because how much influence there is from the community. It's kind of like micropolitics. I know that's a term that we don't talk about a lot, but there are, you know, people refer to the establishment, right? It's like a, you know, this little monster that walks around and does bad stuff, but it is just people. And some of those people, albeit probably well-intentioned, do stifle, you know, in my opinion, the DNC hurts their base far more than any other detractors by using tactics like that.
Oh, of course.
Oh, absolutely. Mike brought up one comment here. Mike is posting in our chat. And again, if anyone wants to weigh in, write it in the chat. We'll see it here. We'll read it on air. So Mike says, that is one of the things neither party knows how to deal with. Active people that are not doing this to further their political career. And I think there's some wisdom to that, so that if generations, we have had people who are rising stars. And we saw this with Josh Howley. His mentor now is backtracking and saying, I wish I'd never met him, But Josh Hawley was a rising star in the Republican Party. And these are things that both parties kind of cater to. And this is the scratch my back, look the other way, and either there's going to be a paid job for you or other type of thing. We'll appoint you to a seat when it comes time, all of these sort of things. And those are things that are used to keep people in line, keep them quiet, and to toe the party line. Same thing that, the superdelegates, they are owed special treatment because they have put in the work and they kept quiet when they needed to, and it was their turn. Pete Buttigieg is now getting a cabinet seat because he kept his mouth shut about Iowa and all the debacle there. So let's talk a little bit more about your campaign experience. So after the Bernie campaign, and that wrapped up in 2016-17, you continued activism and all of this sort of thing. So did you see more of this kind of behavior, the controlling, manipulative behavior?
Yeah, absolutely. So the game is, and I'll give you the brass tacks. It is to raise money. That's the sole. So one thing that I heard continuously when I was organizing, and just for example, the one of the first meetings I did was at a bar I worked at, and we hosted the first meeting there, and then we continued to find space throughout. The organizers are kind of like, and there's a gentleman I know we talked briefly before this named Joseph Ibatara, who I think has a pretty good fix for this problem. So I'll try to circle back to that. But as far as organizers go, they're kind of the unsung heroes of the campaign life. So many times I'm looking at it as building a base, tying community members and networking. To some people, they're like, it's like, this is the word, get the butts in the seat, right? Like these people are just names, just numbers, to fill, phone bank and canvassing. And they obviously those things are important. All right. No one that is going to say otherwise. The problem is when any progressive and even some, like community actions, like people just say someone they're like, you know what, I'm going to go out here and I'm going to organize these events. The DNC sees those things as bidding defiance to their power. So if you're raising anybody, I'd say the same was with like Black Lives Matter. When they started getting a following, and could put people out to do things, that's when you start, if you're not working with the party, you'll start putting a target on your back.
Oh, absolutely. And I can personally attest to this because in my own county party, even the Republicans were talking about my husband and I being rising stars. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Oh, we held meetings in our house and we're training up and recruiting new PCs. That little bit alone was enough to spark my party leaders to put a target on our backs. So in my case, and anybody can still go out and read the court case that we brought for defamation and all of these sort of things, they were literally damaging our women-owned business, a business I owned with a friend of mine, while at the same time taking party money to buy Me Too plaques for themselves because they organized a women's march rally in Chicago. It just boggles the mind that anybody who happens to be a rising star, who's not anointed by them, who isn't hand chosen, they're going to come after you, and they're going to come after your character and all sorts of things. So we see this quite a lot. So now, without naming names, Trevor, unless you want to, I'm totally cool with it. But we were having conversations about the force the vote, and why is the squad now stepping back? Right, first excuse we heard was we're holding out for committee assignment seats, and those committee assignment seats came, and largely the squad was all shunned. Okay, so then what? And then it was, well, we're holding out for procedural votes, PAYGO. Okay, well, anybody who has any understanding of economics, and Andy can certainly speak to PAYGO once again, if that was not a gift. So in your estimation, based on your experience working with campaigns and staffers at that level, what's going on behind the scenes here? What's your best guess?
Yeah. So just on a basic level, say you get hired to a campaign, and this was the pressure that was put on me. I didn't get into it for campaign life. I had that very, optimistic, like I said, albeit naive view of we're all on the same team. When I started trying to push back against some of the things that you've mentioned, that's when you start drawing the fire. And you get warned. You're like, hey, if you want a career, there was a particular individual, in the Tennessee area that's hugely affluent. This person's filthy rich. And we butted heads a lot. And what it is, when I mention that micro politics, is people don't see that as the establishment, but this person was an establishment person. And the beefs, as it were, are generally very petty. They're not even some of the, like, people are donating when they're donating strictly to a campaign. Some of it's just a lot of it's kind of like Mean Girls, to be honest with you. It's there's not a lot of work getting done. The things that are being talked about, it's like a lot of meetings where you just get in a room and then you just haggle. It's almost like a talk therapy group for, I guess, people on the left, instead of driving action. But when you're an organizer and you take on that career, the problem with it is, after the campaign, where are you going to go, right? What candidate are you going to go to? And it puts incredible amount of pressure on you to kind of play the game so you can get hired to that next campaign. And then if you happen to be a person who, has somewhat of a moral code, you're not going to work for some candidates. I mean, that was one of the biggest things that hurt me, is seeing people that, worked for Bernie Sanders jump straight to Michael Bloomberg for a check. And there's ways around that, but if there's that much pressure on a lower level, then whatever AOC is experiencing in Congress is tenfold. And, there is, I'm just going to be brass tacks. There is but for better lack of terms, you get to this point, and they drive this analogy too. It's almost cultish in its delivery, that the people that are angry at you, if they were in your shoes and you got to this place, they would do the same thing. They would do the same thing. They would take the money. They would do whatever they had to do to play the system. And I'm not going to speak to whatever AOC is thinking or doing right now, but in my mind, I've seen it. There's a high probability that she's kind of bought into that ideology. And I think that's where people are at right now. Is she going to, do what her campaign promises were?
Okay, so here's the way. First, I want to get to a couple comments that came in. I think these are relevant to this particular point. And then, Andy, if you want to add to the conversation, I definitely want to make sure I don't talk over you yet again today. But I want to address that point. So Mike says the ability to turn to party bosses and say, you have no power here, when they threaten any future political prospects, just dumbfounds them. And I have literally seen this. When you tell them I'm not in it for the money, I'm not in it for they've got nothing else to follow up with. And then Dave says, I'm advocating for community-owned broadband. And he said, early on, I reached out to both parties and they gave policy reasons for not getting involved. So they said no. And it's simply platitudes. And I think both of those kind of tie into what you were saying about candidates and things like this. But my point on this is, with AOC, we saw this under Obama when he built this grassroots apparatus and then just let it die as soon as he got elected. The power and the rise of Bernie and AOC and all of these came from the grassroots. We continue to be the opportunity for continued power and leverage for them that they are no longer using. So I keep looking at, squad members, and I want to tell them, hey, if you've got a relative tied up in a basement somewhere, blink twice. You got to let us know these things. If they're applying pressure to you in an untoward way, and they do, let us know and we can take care of it. Hell, Twitter, as an example, identified the terrorists in the Capitol siege faster than the FBI. we're good at this shit. Help us help you. So, Andy, what do you think about, the points that Trevor's making? Do you have anything to add? Am I wrong?
Well,
are the chat folks wrong?
it's difficult for me to weigh in because I don't like saying or giving my opinion per se, just because the fact that I'm a Canadian, on the outside. And even when I started my activism, realized that I thought that it was more important to be involved in the American scene because of the for lack of a better term, fuck upness of American politics. But from what I've observed, and I've kind of been a little bit of a fence sitter when it's come to the force the vote and all the stuff and Jimmy Dore. And I've weighed in on, a little bit about Jimmy's past and whatever. And the fact that it seems to me that so much emphasis is being put on this at a time of a pandemic when people are really hurting and really need to weigh in more on an emergency bailout of the people rather than, something that's could just be like more of an esoteric or a cosmetic force the vote on Medicare for all that we know is not going to pass, right? And there's different reasons for or against that, whatever. But the one thing that I have observed in my time doing this, and I'll look at a specific example, and this is based on a conversation that I was part of with a gentleman, professor by the name of Robert Hockett, who is a law professor at Cornell Law. And he, at one time, was on staff with Bernie, Liz Warren, and AOC. So he's a very respected and renowned lawyer in the movement. And, so is privy to quite a bit of information that most people aren't. And when we're talking about Liz Warren, and in 2016, why she backed Hillary Clinton, at a time where she very easily could have taken the progressive reins and ran with it. Her stock as a progressive was quite high at that time. And I think that it really hurt her when she backed Hillary. Well, it turns out that a lot of that was basically because you don't want to cross the Clinton dynasty in government, because then that's neoliberal entity is such a powerful thing that with a stroke of a pen or a raise of an eyebrow, they could basically annihilate your career as a politician, right? And that's what we're talking about in terms of how things work in politics right now and who's in charge. And I think a lot of especially congresspersons like AOC and any of the squad and the people that are going in now, like Cori Bush and those people, they go into Congress with the best of intentions, right? With the idea that they're going to get there and they're going to have a major hand in making changes and serious political changes. But I think a lot of times this isn't new, right? Look what happened to John Lewis when, an activist, civil rights movement gets into Congress. I'm going to make changes. I'm going to continue the fight for Black and brown people. And then you're hamstrung because the political regime that's in charge basically doesn't allow you any movement, right? And I think that that's a huge part of all of this, right? I think that especially with people like AOC who didn't have a political career, that basically came in what I would call off the street with all these aspirations and then realized that, oh, I guess that's not the way it works, and then they try to maneuver and there's very little space to do that, right? That's my understanding of it, right? From the border with my box of popcorn watching.
No, I think you're right, because we've seen that time and time again. And you have to go into a role like that, either the Senate or whatever. And I think, Trevor, you can speak to this. The amount of work that it takes to get elected alone, it's really hard for somebody to look back on all the time, money, effort, blood, sweat, and tears and say, okay, I'm going to throw all of that away and just be a complete rebel rouser and risk not getting anything done. Not necessarily making the case for it, because I would definitely be that person. But not everybody is that way, right? So you can speak to the effort it takes.
Yeah. So I worked personally with Corbin Trent, which was her former communications director. So the people I was working with the Bernie campaign, Zach Exley, others, went on to form Justice Democrats. And that was at the time when, after the Bernie campaign, there was the decisions on what we were going to do. They had the thing, brand new Congress, Justice Democrats. You had all these little, things popping up that people were trying to get upstarted. When you talk about the blood, sweat, and tears, that's what I will speak to kind of some of the people that I think are on the ground. The blood, sweat, and tears was not put in by AOC. I'm going to tell everybody that that's not the case. So just a prime example would be the hashtag #allow debates. Those were formulated by organizers across the country that pissed off their local parties by forcing them to go from 8 debates to 16 debates. And here's how I look at it. It's like you have your little Bernie army get you from 8 to 16 debates. If those people had not thrown themselves at the will of the establishment, then it's likely that you would never get, you have never got those extra 8 debates. And to put that in perspective, the previous primary between Hillary Clinton and Obama had 26 debates, right? So that was not a bad ask. But if you make that argument, there's a separate timeline here that could have been like, well, what if we all did the politically establishment thing and didn't do the debates? Well, then Bernie wouldn't have got as much exposure. AOC wouldn't have, therefore me and Corbin Trent and other people, they wouldn't have got to form the Justice Democrats, which ended up giving her, was the only option she had. She wasn't a big, like you said, she was a waitress. And coming from a bouncer turned organizer, I'm sure, I know what she faced from a waitress turned congresswoman. She rode the wave of the Bernie campaign. And there are some people who I think, legitimately think that she should be a rebel rouser and should highlight some of the things in the party. That's why we like Bernie Sanders. He did it alone for 40 or 50 years, especially if that's what you're campaigning on, is rebel rousing. I think that's the fundamental thing where a lot of people are not overlooking it is like, it'd be different if you were saying, I'm going to be the strategic, play the game person. That's not what she was saying. I know that there's the whole door thing. And he's not wrong. He can be as bombastic. He's a comedian. The fact that we were told that we're electing a person from the people, we're electing a waitress to Congress, and it seems to some people like, well, you got in there and now you're the congresswoman. Now you can't critique AOC, or we can't even talk genuinely about the different platforms. For example, there was a lot of propaganda put out about, electing McCarthy. That's untrue. There was another path to do it, but that got overshadowed. So you're overshadowing your base. What I would argue is that in the long run, you're doing a lot more damage that you're not going to be able to see. And I personally think one of those is going to be an insurrection in 2024. I don't think much will get done in this next 4 years, and then we're gonna be back to square one. So at some point, and this is a maybe not a great analogy, but if you've watched the old like medieval war movies, right? And if they're an accurate movie, they show the two guys, or the two armies on either side of one another, and they're kind of. Have you ever seen that with the sword play? Like it looks like not one guy wants to start. Like who wants to be the first one in to get stabbed, right? That's literally the same thing that's in politics. At some point, somebody's going to have to get there and throw themselves to the mercy of the establishment. And then here's the God's honest truth. AOC isn't going anywhere. She still has her base. She's not. That's where people are kind of like, we're going to back you if that happens. She's going to win re-election. And yeah, I think people are have a genuine place to be irritated about that.
So let me ask you this, having worked in campaigns and working heavily on messaging, because you really got to get it down to the 3-second soundbite now, no longer the 30-second. Here's my problem with the squad and a candidate AOC versus legislator AOC is the rhetoric that she ran on, I believe, was sincere for candidate AOC. For legislator AOC, it is not. So now to me, the real damage in all of this is when that candidate rises, who has the backbone and is ready to throw themselves at the mercy of all of this, we're not going to recognize them because they're going to try and make their case, and they're going to sound a whole lot like what we've already heard. We were all energized and refreshed by what Bernie Sanders was saying. I remember everybody peeking, going, wait a second, I'd never heard this before. And then we heard it from AOC on an amped up level, and then a lot of the other squad members. How are we going to recognize the one that comes along who actually will do this? Because even now, I'm looking at Nina Turner going, okay, well, it sounds good. You know what I mean? How do we as organizers, as campaign staff, as people who are still pushing, even from Dem enter, Dem exit, whatever it is, now what do we do? And that to me is the most crime of the force the vote issue. How I personally, I don't know what the answer is, but I think as an organizer, it's added a whole new level of challenge. So,
No, you're absolutely right. You know, if you want me to weigh in on that, Andy, if you want to jump in too.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Trevor.
Yeah, so as far as you're absolutely right, we had to wait 40 or 50 years for Bernie Sanders, and a person that, you know, you look back at his record and you try to pin something on this guy and you can't. And the truth is, you know, Bernie's like okay, yeah, great. Like, he's not a personality. He's not someone that you're going to, you know, talk to at a cocktail party. That's kind of the problem with the, you know, progressives, whatever. We hold the people who are trying to fight and who will actually fight to this impossible standard, you know, character wise, whereas opposed, I mean, just look at Biden, you know, you ain't black, right? If a progressive said something like that, the progressives would kill them for the DNC. It's one of those things, like, the person that's probably more apt to fight for you is probably not going to be the most well-spoken. They might not have the greatest personality, but they're going to be genuine in what they've seen. And yeah, I can't argue with the philosophy that it might take another, you know, decade or so before you're like, oh, this person's he or she knows that they've been fighting this the whole time. They're pushing up. I thought that person was going to be, and still kind of on the fence that person's going to be Nina Turner. That, you know, time will tell. But yeah, it's totally valid.
Well, one thing that she's got, and the three main criticisms of Bernie while he was still a candidate was he's old, he's white, and he's yelly. Right? Those were the three main things that people that were in like Harris's camp or Buttigieg or anybody were saying that those were, because there was nothing else to get him on, because he's been a righteous fighter for the working families of the United States for his entire career, unwavering, right? It was so bad. The only way they attacked him was to attack the people that supported him, right? That's what we're looking at, right? And Bernie was so important because he energized an entire movement, right? In a leaderless movement. He was the face of the movement, right? But Bernie was trying to transition away from that even in his message in 2020 with Not Me, Us, right? We look at it now, we understand that maybe there aren't as many progressives in Congress as we would have liked to this point, that there would have been, you know, more people running or more people successful. And there was a lot of them. Like, we have built relationships even here with our little network with people like Lauren Ashcraft in New York City and all and just wonderful progressive candidates. The problem is they've still got to fight the neoliberal regime. They've still got to fight the liberal elites, and they are the ones with all the money. It didn't help that there was a pandemic, and a lot of the ways that you can go out and get some name recognition were curtailed by the fact that people were locked in their homes. But we're seeing that we're that a lot of those people that were great candidates didn't win, right? So the establishment is still there. And the nice thing about Nina now stepping basically into Bernie's shoes, as far as I'm concerned, is it gives a central figure to this movement. It continues the way that we were gaining some traction, right? We may not have been ready to jettison Bernie, but by having someone with the same message, the same passion, someone that is loved by this movement, step into those shoes, I think is very, very valuable, right? Kerri and I have talked about how we have to attack the establishment on as many fronts as we can, from within the party and outside the party, right? And I think that Nina stepping into those shoes is huge for the movement. I hope that she is willing to take that on, right? Because I think that's massive as far as progressives are concerned. A new way to focus energy on a single candidate. And it might turn out to be the exact same thing in 2024, that, we might get there and it might turn out to be another 2016 or 2020, but at least it grows the movement. It gives us a chance to try to figure out how to organize, how to get better at what we're doing. And at this point, there's really no other way to tackle it, right?
To Kerri's point, I want to go back to what she said about, when I say getting a fighter, I do think Nina Turner has that balance. I don't necessarily, Kerri said, we want a rabble rouser that's probably more our temperament. Maybe that's not suited for politics. And I can see that. I want to think, and we actually had Nina Turner down to TSU for a rally. And, if anybody has that balance to, be able to speak truth to power, but also know when it's not, like people were critiquing her about not commenting on the highly inflammatory discussion between AOC and Dore on the Medicare for All vote. That would have absolutely been done for her to comment on at the time. And there's checking that, when is a politician being truly pragmatic and trying to get there, and when are they doing it for their, their own gain? With Nina, I don't have a crystal ball. I feel like Nina is going to be that in 2024. But that I don't have a crystal ball. So,
well, I think it's a very important way forward as far as I'm concerned. It's another avenue of organizing on the left, which is what we sorely need.
So the chat actually is weighing in and seems to be in agreement with both of you here. It says, Dave says it's a numbers game, got to make it safe for them to do the right thing, right? To your point, you don't want to be the first one on the dance floor, but if you have all your friends there, you're more likely to jump in. And then Mike says, get rid of the Electoral College and replace it with ranked choice voting, and that will go a long way in getting the establishment hooks out of the system and opening up the field for those good candidates, not just for the presidential, but all the way down the ballot. And that's a conversation we have had. I've actually invited somebody on who is part of an organization helping open up the vote and voting and making sure that there's integrity in it that goes part and parcel with this ranked choice voting. So I'm hoping to have that on here. But Trevor, before you get out of here, I really got to ask you this question, and I'm going to put you on the spot just a little bit. So let's take the example of Nina Turner. Nina Turner weighing in on some contentious issues, whatever. Let's say she runs, and it looks like she is running. Now we get those, what I call harpies. These are the social stack leftists, the faux progressives, who are really the attack dogs for the establishment. Let's not mince words. They are sent out under the guise of being leftist, being inclusive, but their real mission is to tear down good candidates. That is what they do. Sometimes they're paid in trade, sometimes they get prestige, and sometimes it's ego-driven exclusively. But this is why I refer to them as the harpies. So in Nina's case, she's going to get those harpies. We saw them with Bernie and, as Andy said, too old, too yelly, the Bernie bros, all of that sort of thing. Do we have a counter exercise for these harpies? Because we know they're coming. What do we do?
That is a great question. Yeah. And you had mentioned something else that made me want to weigh on that. Yeah. Nina's hands are tied in so much that we actually have to be out. And, I'm not saying you call the other side Bernie bros and do all the gaslighting that they do to us. I'm not saying you fight fire with fire in that aspect, but you do fight fire in the fire with the aspect of we have to stop taking and laying down to these, bare bones, vague critiques. Like, they already do it, by the way, with Nina. They say that she's needs to watch her tone, right? So, I've heard that a lot. I've heard people straight up call her a Bernie bro and everything else. Yeah, we have to be more fervent in attacking those. And I use that word seriously. I believe the progressives are too timid in defending themselves. There's nothing wrong. It's a false equivalency. If you're being attacked by someone, you're within your rights to defend yourself. All right. I'm not saying levy attacks. I'm saying defend yourselves. And we have to do that. And that will empower that candidate like Nina Turner to be able to get more done if we're behind her.
So wait a second. You're saying it's not on Nina, it's on us.
That's definitely on us. If you just look at the rhetoric, it was talked about, how aggressive Bernie bros were. And, I got stacks on stacks of screenshots of different, I've heard some heinous things from, I guess the establishment side of things, the brunchers. That's a false narrative. Everybody has their toxic people. Everybody has their, people that are, just quite frankly, vicious. What I'm saying is we don't have to condone that behavior, but you can't part and parcel every conversation with civility. Like I go from the Jane Elliott. I don't know if she did the brown eyes, blue eyes experiment. And, she said, hey, sometimes fire with fire works. And, I would like to see in 2024 leading up to it that we don't try to, because the establishment uses that whole team. It's very gaslighty. They use that whole team and, we got to do this. We can't, don't create division. There's already division. If those words escape your mouth, you're not into politics. That's just my view of it.
Right.
I agree with
absolutely.
that. I agree with that completely. And it's, I like the analogy I like is Star Trek, the original series, right? If you got hired to act, be an actor in that series, and they handed you a red shirt, you were gonna be a one-hit wonder on that show, right? You get the red shirt, first 15 minutes, you're gonna get shot. Maybe we need one person or two people to go into Congress knowing that they've got the red shirt on to mix it up a little, right? Maybe someone that doesn't necessarily want a career in politics.
So just to point out that analogy, I like it. The thing about the red shirt, though, is the truth is you're not going to get shot and be off screen. If you get shot, you're probably going to formulate a gigantic movement and still be a campaign leader or something like that. If AOC did that, AOC is going to be taken care of. But she's got to get in there and got to do stuff. It can't be this continuous we're going to go with this long-term plan type thing,
Yeah.
Oh,
no,
absolutely.
I
She'd be legend. Yeah. So awesome. Trevor, this has been an amazing conversation. I definitely want to have you come back and continue it because there are so many nooks and crannies we did not get into. And you and I talked about it offline with both our campaign experience and those dirty stories. So next time you come back, let's get into some of those behind the scenes stories and the things that that actually happen on a campaign that nobody knows is really happening. So when we talk about, hey, you're going into battle, it is a fight, people can see that it literally, you are going to
absolutely
war, right? So great. That'll be great, good fun. So thank you so much for joining us. And I did post in the chat a link to his YouTube podcast. So check that out and follow up with him and join in his ongoing conversations, all the things that are going on. Nashville, is that right? You're actually in Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville, Tennessee. Mm-hmm.
Right. Awesome. Okay. So
thanks for having me, guys.
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
No problem. Thank you so much. Andy, just one quick thing. Well, one thing came up in the chat for you, which I thought was funny. You keep referencing popcorn, and the chat wants to know why you're not having a bag of all dressed chips. So I guess that's like
the problem is that if you eat too many chips, it's really hard on your gums, right?
Oh,
so,
gotcha.
And it's not, if you can get popcorn that isn't, heavy with the toppings and stuff. So it's not bad for you. All dressed chips, there's no such thing as diet all dressed chips.
I'm gonna have to look this up. I didn't know what it was. And the other thing is, this is happy news. We had the interview with director Brad Lyon, who has the project Let's Party. And he came on and he was talking to Brandon. I posted a link to that interview if you missed it. But his movie project now has the funding that he was looking for. And he was doing the rounds on social media and all of the independent media. So this was you. This was grassroots funding of a really great project, not studio funded by you. And I am so proud that we were able to support that here on our network and get other independent media outlets to host him as well. And that's exactly the power of grassroots. That's what we talked about today. Here's a prime example of an entire movie that's being made that would not otherwise be made if it weren't for you. So I think that this is, pat yourself on the back. Good news for today. And so with that, we'll
I think
see
it's
what the rest of the
I think
week
it's a
brings.
safe bet to say that he didn't get a check from George Soros.
He did not get his check from George Soros, not at all. So, but we did send him a coffee mug, and I got a message that from his cohort, she got her mug too. They're so thrilled with the coffee mug. So if you want your coffee mug, it's available on our store, and that's how we fundraise here. We don't do paywalls like New York Times and WAPO. I was trying to pull articles, and there's paywalls there, and then Mike actually made a suggestion in the chat that we should create some merch because I used the term the chat folks. So maybe we'll get our designers up on that for you. So thank you so much.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. We should make the official chat folks t-shirt, right? World Tour 2021.
Which is your house.
Yeah.
Stop it.
Locations
So awesome.
TBA.
Yeah, exactly. I love it. So thank you so much for everybody who weighed in this morning. And we'll be back on Wednesday. We're working on some great guests. If we can work out the schedule, then I think this week is going to be lit, but we'll see. I don't want to say anything till it's confirmed, but in any case, join us for coffee on Wednesday morning, bright and early, 10 a.m. Eastern. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Trevor. It was a really great conversation. And we will see you on Wednesday. Take care.
We bout that, ayy. We singing the song. We out here, yeah, spitting the facts, how it's supposed to be. Hair of the dog, we keep it in G. Whoa.